Welcome to another episode of Southern Scrap Nation. I'm your host, Daniel Jonas. On today's podcast, we'll just be going over our post-fight analysis for the UFC card that happened this weekend, UFC 222. Along with that, I'll go into a little bit of the Showtime card with Deontay Wilder, Luis Ortiz. So why don't we get started? So it's 11 o'clock here in Charlotte, North Carolina, on a pretty sunny but cold day. I guess there's a winter storm still brewing up north, and it's kind of affecting us, but more because it's fucking cold, and I hate the cold. Some would argue it's not cold. I'm going to argue it's cold. So today, like I said, we're going over UFC 222, Chris Cyborg versus Yana Kunitskaya. The post-fight analysis of this, not brought to you by anyone, but just brought to you by the fans, you guys, the support, love. Please subscribe, write, review, whatever you must do. I just love reactions to the podcast. I love talking about it. The more of a reaction we get, the more I can do. The more support we get, the more I can do. So, once again, I appreciate all the support. Subscribe, talk, whatever you want to do about the podcast. You can reach me at danieljonas94@gmail.com. Or you can catch me in the mornings at Charlotte Jiu-Jitsu Academy training here, as well as the UFC gym in Matthews where I coach. So if you're looking for a MMA coach, I'm the guy for you. Anyway, going back to this weekend, we got the main event, which wasn't really the biggest thing of the weekend or of the fight card in general. Cyborg wins in a first round, not TKO, I would assume, over Yana. There's not really much to say about this fight other than, I mean, obviously I called it, but most people can call it. There's not really much to it that you couldn't see. So with that, what essentially happened was Cyborg went in there. Yana, I don't know why she said this, but before the fight, she talked about how Cyborg doesn't have knockout power. Right, yeah, Cyborg isn't Rumble Johnson and can't, shoot your tooth into the next stand, or maybe she can, but it's not that kind of like Ngannou, Overeem kind of power, obviously, because she's not that big. However, when she punches you or punches any girl of her in that division, or even in or obviously the divisions below her, there's reaction. There's immediate reaction. The only ones that didn't really have reaction, I would assume, would be Holly, but even then, Holly Holm, she still reacted accordingly. And then Tanya Evinger, but that's just because Tanya is so tough as she is. Like I said, Tanya gave Yana a hard time. And then on top of that, Yana also got submitted by Tanya. Tanya put pressure on Tanya Evinger. And if that's the case, then Cyborg doesn't need to put that much pressure, and that's exactly what happened. The first punch of the match hit Yana, and the first thing she did was drop for a John Smith single. For those that don't know what a John Smith single is, it's essentially a single leg, but really works in wrestling more because there's no strikes allowed. However, it worked in Yana's favor, but it's where you drop your shoulder literally to the beginning of the ankle and the end of the shin. And then you just drive your shoulder at an awkward angle where you cup the heel and you drive at an angle, forcing the person to typically go on the side of whatever leg, or like on the outside side of whatever leg you're attacking, or leg you're going off, or going for a takedown on. So she did that. She tried to take Cyborg's back. However, Cyborg is also a jiu-jitsu black belt. She's a judo brown belt. She wrestles and trains with Tito Ortiz. So as soon as she shook Yana off, and as soon as they got the fight going back on the feet, once again, Cyborg just started throwing punches, and Yana was in the corner. And like I said, what was going to happen? Yana goes for a low kick, and Cyborg catches it, shoots it right down the pipe, and Yana crumbles down, and that's the end. I mean, there's not much more to say to this fight. Like I said, this was going to be a Lena Landsberg, Leslie Smith kind of fight. She felt her power, and she realized there's nothing that she could bring to the table to kind of give her for example, Holly had her footwork. So regardless if Holly felt the power, she knew that her footwork was better than Cyborg, so she could rely on that. Yana didn't really have anything to rely on to get her or make her feel comfortable in the fight. She realized as soon as Cyborg hit her, then got her off her back. She's like, she's better than me everywhere. I don't really have a chance. I appreciate her going out there, taking a fight that no girl in their right mind, especially as a 135er, is gonna take. You know, Yana was the bantamweight champion. However, the only person that I do see giving Cyborg maybe a run for her money, or even dethroning her, would be Amanda Nunes, just because of how hard Amanda hits, and giving Amanda that chance to bulk up would give her some favor. The only issue with that is, I think, however, Dana White kind of didn't cancel it because it was never set in stone, but Amanda and Raquel Pennington were in talks of fighting on that Rio card. After this performance, Dana's like, maybe we just scrap that and we do Cyborg and Amanda in Rio. I would like to see Amanda fight Raquel Pennington, beat Raquel Pennington, and then do the July 7th card. Because when we get into the co-main event, excuse me, when we get into the co-main event of this card that I've been talking about, there's stuff that you can do with July 7th that would be kind of cool. However, we still got a couple cards on the way. For example, 223 in April, 224, and 225, right? There's a lot that can happen on those cards that can, maybe not so much 225, but 224, 223, that could set up something good for July 7th. So for right now, I would like to see Amanda and Cyborg July 7th after Amanda hopefully beats Raquel Pennington. But there's stuff that could happen, such as Raquel Pennington winning and then that not coming to fruition, or something happens at 223 that makes another fight for July 7th a little bit more enticing. But for right now, they may go with the Chris Cyborg versus Amanda Nunes in Rio, which would be kind of cool. That'd be a pretty hype fight. Yeah, that'd be a pretty hype fight. So, as much as I'd love to keep on talking about Cyborg, and as much as this was the Cyborg show, God damn that co-main event. I mean, I definitely didn't call it. I definitely was wrong. But I don't think anyone called it the way that it happened, or would have happened. First off, going back to what I said, Frankie beats Brian Ortega everywhere, through experience, through boxing, through wrestling, through his groundwork, just because of the amount of time and work and experience he's put into it. But not tonight. Youth triumphed over age. And that was pretty much the definition of what the night was. I mean, obviously Yana didn't win, but that's a whole different story on its own. But tonight, Brian Ortega put everything together. This is the changing of the guard in 2018, but all over the board, right? I mean, tonight was a perfect example. These guys like Brian Ortega, where they started when they were super young in their early 20s, are now taking out, not necessarily like the Minotauro Nogueiras of the world or the Anderson Silvas. They're taking out the guys that beat those guys, right? The sport's changed so fast, and people have gotten so much better on average with MMA because of the training, the accessibility, and the renown all over the world of the sport, that you're seeing guys that started at 21, 22, 23 fighting professionally, um, fighting professionally, are now getting into their groove because they're starting to hit their prime physically and in their age, as well as mentally. They're all there. They've been putting in the hours. I mean, Brian Ortega's got not 10 wins now, 10 professional fights, all finishes, by the way. I think all but one are finishes. Or maybe they're all finishes. Yeah, I think they're all finishes. I mean, but you've seen it. You've been seeing it. Holloway versus Jose Aldo, right? Conor McGregor's kind of on that fringe, right? He's beaten like Eddie Alvarez. They're not necessarily like super vets, but they're still vets nonetheless. I don't know why I brought Connor up, but Darren Till, Cowboy Cerrone. Cowboy Cerrone is a vet, but he's not to the sense of, I would say, like a Mirko Krokop vet, but he is a vet. He's one of the newer vets. Carlos Condit, all these guys that I saw on the come up when I first started the sport 8 years ago are now considered the old guys. And it's wild. It's wild to me. Last night watching Frankie Edgar get knocked out in the first round and never seen that guy being finished. And I've seen Frankie, I mean, either watching it live or what. I've never seen him hurt. For example, the Jeremy Stevens fight. He gets kicked, sat down, but immediately is back up to his feet. Right? He's been in worse danger with the Gray Maynard fight. He's been in all these things. But you knew it was the end. It's crazy. Like, Frankie Edgar got knocked out just like every other person would. That knockout wasn't due to fatigue and just trying to keep his head up and keep breathing. And, third round. No, it was first round, uppercut, shut the lights off. And Brian Ortega's not a one-hitter quitter kind of guy either. I don't know if it's the chin endurance or the resistance of Frankie nowadays where he's had so many wars or whatever. Or if you're just looking at fucking Brian Ortega's talent and his exponential and expedited rise with talent and skill that he has, where he's been training with killers all his life in jiu-jitsu, finds this boxer who, I guess, boxing coach who really fancies him in a way of, I guess, saw himself in him, and they became good partners in that way, which is what you need in a sport, and what he had with jiu-jitsu. But going over the fight, I mean, there's not much to really take away because it was only one round, but in that one round, there's a lot that I took away from it. First, they started boxing. Frankie was going in and out. He was doing everything perfect. I mean, it wasn't like Frankie was having an off day. I looked at Frankie and I was like, there seems something off with him. But Brian Ortega was keeping the jab out. He was like popping 3 jabs. Frankie was popping jabs too. They were pretty much boxing. It was fun. It was fun to watch. But then where I saw it kind of change was Frankie went for a takedown shot, and Brian Ortega grabbed his chin and grabbed his head as though he was going to go for a choke. And then from there, Frankie's takedown attempts seemed they were not as the Frankie Edgar takedown attempts that I've seen in past. Obviously, you don't want to take Brian Ortega to the ground, but there's a way of taking a jiu-jitsu practitioner to the ground without them, without being in their guard. Justin Gaethje in his very first MMA fights did a perfect example of it. Rampage was pretty good at it. There are guys that are able to take an opponent down and then just stand back up and kind of use the takedown as just something to get. Yoel Romero is pretty good at it. He doesn't stay on the ground with his opponent. He kind of just uses the takedown to just take the person down. And then he kind of like lets them back up. Doesn't really, or he swarms them and elbows them to oblivion. But a lot of what he does is more just take them down and then scramble back up. So I was hoping Frankie was gonna kind of use that strategy where he would take where he would take Ortega down, but not necessarily keep a hold of him, connect his hands or whatever. Thought he'd do more knee taps, stuff that wouldn't require a lot of. It would require a little bit more angles and less strength and leverage. Maybe double jab, cut the angle, knee tap through, and like run through Brian Ortega with a takedown rather than control, takedown, and hold. But even then, and Frankie had his chin in the right place. He had his head in the right place. He put it right in the center of Ortega's chest. But Ortega tried to grab it, and I think Frankie felt. I think Frankie felt something. I think he felt how dangerous of a submission artist Ortega is. There's some people where they can put you not necessarily in a submission, but put you in a position where you get out of it and you go, oh shit, like I cannot be there, like anywhere. When we get down for the list, we'll talk more about that. But I think it was more of those. I think it was more of a sensation of Frankie felt the hold that Brian had and was like, nope, no wrestling at all. Frankie did well with leg kicks. I mean, that's what he had to do. Taller opponent, leg kicks, leg kicks, leg kicks. And then it happened. Brian Ortega jabbed in, since Brian's a little bit longer, fight IQ-wise, elbowed him. Had him hurt. Didn't go wild. Frankie tried to fight back. Brian cut the angle. And with such calm, cool, collect, killer instinct, shuffled to the right, hit him with a left uppercut, and the uppercut was perfect. It was off an angle where a lot of people are saying Brian Ngannou or Francis or whatever, and they were taking the meme of Francis's punch to Overeem and showing the head snap back. Yeah, no, I mean, it kind of looked like that in the sense of the person went straight back and got knocked out, but that's as much as it was. When Ngannou threw that punch, it was more of a shovel punch. He throws wide, almost from like the hips. Who does a very good job? Wilder does a pretty good job of this, where they kind of throw from the hips, and they're like these. They're not necessarily hooks across the chin. They're not necessarily uppercuts where they're coming straight up through the middle. They're more these like looping, big person kind of hits that guys like Francis Ngannou and Deontay Wilder can get away with. There's not a lot of defense that comes with it, but having that much knockout power, it works. So what happened was, as he cut the angle, he punched through. Like, he punched through Frankie's chin. And what the difference between that and someone just punching and recoiling it back is that you see it. It hits Frankie's chin and goes past it. As he hits it, he cuts through Frankie's chin and hits at such an awkward angle that it was so perfect that he hit him right on the button. That's it. He hit him on the button. There was a follow-up shot after on the ground. Not necessarily that he did it, but I'd like to see it because of Frankie's ability to endure. I'm glad that Ortega didn't just like try to like walk off of it or get too aggressive. He was smart. He just hit him one good time and then let the ref jump in. What I really take away from this fight is Brian Ortega's just Rory McDonald almost serial killer calmness. It's a Rose Namajunas kind of calmness. Rose and Brian they're one and the same almost. You're kind of those hard life kind of people. Had a lot to go through. Love life, love people. Just want to see the goodness in everything. They're not in there to talk shit and all that. They just want to help people, and they want to use their fame to help people. If that means knocking people out, that means knocking people out. When Brian hit that uppercut on Frankie, honestly, from the replay, I don't even think he was looking at Frankie. He was so calm. I think he was looking at the clock. There's a moment where his eyes, as he hits Frankie, his eyes go either to his corner or they go somewhere else. His fight IQ only comes from a tough upbringing like that. That means he got in fights when he was a kid. There's a couple people, not necessarily a couple people, but you'll see it in fighters. Mike Perry's a good example. They do these certain things that only if you've been in a fight outside of the octagon, on the streets or something like that, that you embrace and you take with you. There's like savagery almost. It's like the savagery. It's like a non-question savagery about these guys. Brian Ortega, obviously, I mean, he's a savage of what he does. He finishes everybody. The Gracie mentality. He's the Hoist Gracie of this next generation, in the sense of he used jiu-jitsu to win matches in the way that the Gracies taught. It's like a resurgence of the Gracie teachings, but with better striking. Right? We're doing a 180 after 25 years. We're back to the jiu-jitsu great base. Because if you have a great choke game, then wrestlers can't do shit. Vice versa, if you're good on your back, wrestlers can't do shit. Da-da-da-da-da. If you set up your striking accordingly, wrestlers can't do anything, and wrestling can't be the dominant. So it's like this resurgence of wrestling, sprawling and brawling was the thing again, with the rise of Joanna Jędrzejczyk showing her defensive wrestling skills, which led into the increase of brilliant European strikers into the UFC. And then now you have this guy, Brian Ortega, who's showing that jiu-jitsu is also a means to the end, and we can't forget it. He sets up the striking. His takedown defense is his jiu-jitsu. It's not necessarily the sprawls. It's not necessarily the brawling. No one wants to go to the ground with him, so they're forced to strike with him. No one wants to stand with Joanna, so they wanted to go to the ground with her. So it's this resurgence. But each time the levels and the techniques and all this change and get better and better and better and better, which, as an MMA hardcore fan as I am and coach, I love. I can't not be impressed with what's going on in the sport, and it's great to see. And I'm so happy that I'm a part of this, to see where it was 5 years ago, where it was 8 years ago, and to see where it is now, and to see the beginnings of a sport, to seeing the improvements of a sport, not necessarily through advertisement, promotion, marketing, whatever the case may be. That's a whole different subject. Just through the pure athleticism, technique, skills of each fighter. So, like I said, UFC 222 was a night of showing out of the new fighters. Once again, Brian Ortega versus Max Holloway. What I love about this fight is Max Holloway probably would have done the same thing to Frankie. I'm not saying that maybe Frankie could have won, because Frankie could have won last night too. Frankie could easily beat Holloway. But I think if Holloway did what he did to Jose, he could have done kind of the same job to Frankie. I love this fight between Max Holloway and Brian Ortega. You got a guy whose striking is better than Ortega's, kind of the same height, kind of the same, not necessarily striking ability. But then you got guys whose jiu-jitsu is just incredible. But the takedowns, I mean, Brian Ortega doesn't take people down. Brian Ortega snatches up necks, but usually in guys that are smaller than him. What I mean by that is what he did to Cub Swanson only happened because Cub Swanson was a couple inches shorter than him. It's very hard to guillotine someone that is taller than you unless they put themselves in that position. Max Holloway doesn't go for takedowns. Max Holloway uses jiu-jitsu the same way that Brian Ortega uses jiu-jitsu. It's almost like a striking battle, but remember what happens when two strikers typically go against each other, which Brian Ortega's not a striker, but he's fooling everyone into thinking he is now, and that can be dangerous. And that's kind of what we saw in this fight is Frankie in the subconscious knows that he can't take Ortega down So he's like, I'm going to strike with him because I don't want to get caught in a submission, which is perfectly understandable. But then everyone forgets that Brian Ortega can also box. So through time, having those different skills and Brian Ortega hit it right on the button and timing where his striking isn't so far behind where he's at a Sage Norcut deficiency where he's not going to be able to gain that. And so with striking, it's a little bit easier to bullshit if you have the athleticism. I will say that because there's a difference between jiu-jitsu and striking on ability and experience and everything to get better. Where striking, if you're really Francis Ngannou, for example, he doesn't need years and years of Muay Thai and kickboxing and K1 experience because knocking someone out is a means to an end in striking. And anyone that knows how to throw a punch can knock anybody out. Whereas in jiu-jitsu and wrestling and groundwork, where it requires more skill and technique to finish someone, that requires time and time on the mat. And Brian Ortega has that in spades. And then the boxing is it's just a caveat for him. Not much more I can say. July 7th, this fight should happen. On top of the Stipe Daniel card or Daniel fight, I think this is a great either co-main event if they want to do 3 fights. This is one to add for sure. Got a heavyweight, not necessarily the lighter guys. This is a division that Conor McGregor's a part of, so people still have a little bit of investment into it. So they're considered lighter guys, but that's a fight that's definitely worth booking just due to hardcore fans. Average fans would enjoy it because these guys are going to come and bring it because they're kind of in the same mentality. They're this new breed that they don't give a fuck about the money. Max Holloway obviously wants to help people, but he's just more of that guy that likes to fight. But we'll get more into that fight later on once it's finalized and announced or really rumored in the works. Obviously, Brian Ortega accepted it. Max Holloway thought about it and tweeted about it, and Brian Ortega's like, well, yeah, of course. But I don't think this fight takes that long to book. So, following that, we go into the Sean O'Malley decision win. Like I said about this fight, Sean O'Malley won. However, it was not easy. Andrei Sukhantov is a hard fighter. He had Andre hurt. He's not the most technical, skilled fighter. Not that he's not a good fighter. He's just Sean called him because he's not, he's a 145er. He's not calling like a Yair Rodriguez just yet, because there are levels to the striking game, and Sean saw weaknesses in Andrei Sukhantov's game where he can expose, and he kind of did. He hit him. He was fast. The pull away right hands were there. What happened was Sean hurt his foot, possibly a fracture. But of course, at the end of it, it was a hard fight. He got taken down, was on top. He was put on top at the very end, just surviving. Fine. Congrats. The win, obviously, he hurt his foot. If you throw that many wheel kicks and that many kicks during a fight for 15 minutes, you're going to break something. Especially a kid that lanky. It's not like he's a stocky kid with big bones, right? He's a lanky fighter. You throw kicks like that, and people block with their elbows, and they block with their forearms. You're gonna probably break something in your foot. You can't be willy-nilly with kicks the way you are. Oh, I can't believe I just said willy-nilly. You can't be willy-nilly with kicks the way you are, like you are in sparring. And even in sparring, you can't be. I've hurt my foot. I've got like 3 dislocated toes right now, right? And that's just from, but there's nothing you can do about it. And that's just from training. That's just from practice. That's not from, it's bag work. That's mitt work. That's sparring. That's not in a fight without, shin pads on or whatever the case may be. That's not forearm to toes. So it was a good win for Sean. Like I said, showing the young generation coming up, kind of not necessarily getting these older guys out, but just showing him the door. Andrei Sukhomtov, obviously, he's got time. He'll still fight. I'm not saying that he should retire. Like everyone that lost in this card should retire, but there's a new wave coming, and you can adapt and try to figure it out. And on this next fight is the guy that did adapt and figure it out a little bit. Um, but once again, Sean O'Malley with the win. Congrats. I'm looking forward. I like watching him fight. I don't hate like a guy that comes in and just does the contender series and then gets put into the main event. I don't care, right? Obviously, he's got stuff to work on, but so does everybody else, right? He's entertaining. I will want to watch him again. I don't think he should be like right before the co-main event. He should probably open up a main event. That was kind of weird. It was like a weird break in the action. It was like the best way I can put it, and the way when I was watching it, what it seemed like to me was I was watching the main event. I guess we're gonna take a break and watch a Fox Sports 1 replay. All right, back to the main event. Sean O'Malley is got a following, but not to the level even for the hardcore fans, where when you watch a main event, you go, "Oh yeah, this makes sense." Not to take anything away from him, it's just maybe we just don't have that fight at all. I got done watching this card at almost 1 o'clock in the morning. We don't need this many fights on the card. If you want to put him as the or the opener to the main event and get rid of another fight, I'm down with that. But don't put him in the middle of the main event just to showcase Sean O'Malley. Either put him in the featured prelim or put him at the beginning, the opener of the main event. So, moving on to the Andrei Arlovski versus Stefan Struve fight. Andrei with the decision win. So, I'm going to be totally honest with you guys. 100% honest. I watched maybe 2 minutes of this fight. Not that it was boring and I was doing something else. Well, I was doing something else, but not that it was boring to the case that I wouldn't have watched it. I'm sure it was just so exciting watching two grown men grapple. When I mean grapple, I mean big dudes just taking each other, or one taking the other one down. I'm sure it was super exciting. But during that time was Deontay Wilder versus Luis Ortiz. So as a boxing head myself, I had to pause, take a break, watch some Showtime, get myself a little bit of that action. All right. And so I was watching the Showtime of Luis Ortiz. After I get done with this, I'll go into that. But for right now, all I can really say about the Andrei Arlovski fight, from the replays, from watching it in general, from what I take, Andrei Arlovski has made adaptations to his game, which has been awesome as an older guy. He had that resurgence coming back, knocking out. He had the fight with Brendan Schaub, won by decision, and then he knocked Travis Brown out, and then I don't know. He had a couple comeback fights, and I was like, oh shit, this is like the resurgence of Andrei Arlovski. And then Stipe came up to him, tapped him on the shoulder, and was like, no, I'm gonna go take the belt real quick. Hold this for me, old man, and hit him with the two-piece up against the fence. So he then went on a skid, lost a couple, and then he came back this fight. Left Winklejohn, went back to Florida, and he was training down there, I think at American Top Team, and then he just used his wrestling. He got more takedowns in this past fight with Stefan Struve than he had in all of his career, which means Andrei Arlovski is now a takedown machine. At least for now. I mean, there's other guys in the division that are for sure better wrestlers than Stefan Struve. As for Stefan Struve, both these guys are kind of on the back nine, but being heavyweights, they can stay in a little bit longer. But I mean, nothing that they did was, I mean, they fought like they fought. The reason why Andrei Arlovski won is because he went in there. Stefan Struve thought he was going to fight Arlovski, and then Arlovski's like, "No, I learned how to put on a wrestling singlet without tripping over my own feet. So I can do that now and then just wrestle them. And I can understand why Stefan Struve had a hard time with that. If Andrei Arlovski comes out and puts out more takedowns than he did in his own whole career, my game plan would be all fucked up too. It's totally understandable. Totally understandable. So not much to talk about during that fight. Like I said, I'll get into the Deontay Wilder Luis Ortiz fight in a second. I'm just gonna go through the rest of this card. Excuse me. So, like I called, Caitlin Vieira with the decision win over Kat Zingano. Not much to say about this fight besides the fact that Kat hasn't fought in 2 years almost, or 2 years. She fought at UFC 200, lost to Juliana Pena, and then lost before that to Ronda Rousey. Hasn't won in like 2 to 3 years. Before that, she beat Amanda Nunes, she beat Miesha Tate, she beat Raquel Pennington. But Caitlin Vieira, she's the new wave. She trains at Nova União. She's a national Brazilian wrestler for, it's a big deal. And Kat was Kat. Kat has a good game plan. Kat has good strikes, but they all come from the clinch, right? So all of her strikes were setups to get to the clinch, almost Ronda Rousey-esque. She was throwing kicks. She was being kind of wild and weird, darting it in, but not darting out. And then Caitlin Vieira was just wrestling pressure, took her down, and won the fight that way. Caitlin Vieira, I don't think she gets a title shot off of this, but definitely now in the talks, in the contender seat. Maybe if they don't do the Amanda Nunes fight, they do Raquel Pennington versus Caitlin Vieira. That'd be kind of cool. So, that's what I took away from that fight. That's the main event for you. That was, like I said, Cyborg first round TKO. Brian T. City Ortega with the first round KO. Sean O'Malley decision win. Andrei Arlovski via decision. And Caitlin Vieira via decision as well. There were also a bunch of split decisions on the card. That's because we had the judge Adelaide Bird. Those that don't know Adelaide Bird, she was famous for the incident this past summer with Triple G and Canelo. The Canelo fight was scored as a draw, and Adelaide Bird was one of the judges. For some reason, it was scored a split decision, even though Canelo for sure won that fight. She essentially robbed the fight from the fans and from Triple G. So that being said, Joe Rogan actually went off on her. It was kind of funny on the Fight Pass prelims. If you guys want to check that out, I'm sure they have it on YouTube. He just goes off on that, on her being the the judge for that night. Hold on, I'm gonna pull up the results from UFC 222 because I'm pretty sure it was a. I'm pretty sure, if I'm not wrong, it was a record for how many split decisions there were that night. In all of UFC history. Can't find it. Phone's being super slow. But I think it was a record, and I think that showed in a lot of the fights. But to each his own. Win's a win. Real quick before I go into the prelims, because there was. Well, actually, I'll go over Mackenzie Dern. Mackenzie Dern beat Ashley Yoda via split decision. What I take away from this fight, Mackenzie Dern, yes, young up and comer. Work on the wrestling. That's what her camp requires from now on. Wrestling. You can't take people down with just jiu-jitsu. She got to take down in the third round. That's what I think won her the fight. She was getting pieced up on the outside by Ashley Yoder. Ashley Yoder was defending her takedowns, making her pay. Mackenzie Dern's ferocious. She reminds me a little bit of Ronda Rousey with her ability to get in, but she's not afraid to get hit. She just needs to work on the wrestling. She needs better takedowns from the cage, from the clinch. She needs to set it up in a way where it's not as obvious that's what she's doing. Other than that, when she got to the ground, I mean, fuck. I mean, Ashley Yoder did not have an answer. She's lucky that she got out of that. If she did that at the very beginning of the match, it would have been over. But it took her 3 rounds to get the takedown. As a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt world champion at the age that she was when she won, and as young as she is and how good she is at Jiu-Jitsu, she beat Gabby Garcia. For those that don't know Gabby Garcia is 200 and something pounds, black belt, continuous IBJJF world champion for the reasons as so, fights in Ryzen, trains with Cyborg, and Mackenzie Dern submitted her. So, her jiu-jitsu is A1 steak sauce, so you can't deny that. But she needs to work on the wrestling because there's more to just fighting than... I mean, she could pull the Damian Maia route and pull guard, but the way that she fights and the aggressiveness and the ferocity that she fights with, it would just interest her to learn a little bit more wrestling. Maybe go to ATT. Maybe go to fucking San Jose, a.k.a., and learn how to wrestle with some of those guys and girls and just go for it. She's so ferocious that the wrestling should be fun for her. She should fucking love it, and I'm sure she will. She just needs to get in there, get her licks there, and then she'll be golden. She'll be golden. And then other than that, you had Alexander Hernandez out of nowhere with a lightning quick right hand to knock out Beneil Dariush, number 12 in the lightweight division, and then this up-and-comer, or this not even up-and-comer, just prospect slash late notice fight taker, quick to just starches him. You had Zach Otto put away Mike Pyle. Mike Pyle's last fight. You had Hector Lombard hit CB Dalloway with a late 2-piece after the buzzer. He did it intentionally. You can see it after he hits him with a 2-piece. He makes like a finger and stuff at him, and he gets DQ'd. It's fair on the DQ. I don't know why they took CB Dalloway out on a stretcher. That was kind of weird. There was a bunch of guys that got knocked out way worse than CB that night. Other than that, yeah, I mean, the young fighters made a statement that night. Anyway, so the UFC 220 card, that's the post-fight analysis of it. There was Jordan Johnson winning against Adam Milstat. A couple other fights, decisions. The John Dodson Pedro Munoz fight. Fuck me, right? I went with John Dodson for the Belém fight, which I was right, and then I flip-flopped over to the Pedro Munoz side for this fight. Should have stuck with my mind, or should have stuck with my gut. John Dodson wins, just quicker, taking the angles, hitting with those lefts. It was beautiful performance by John Dodson. I thought Pedro was going to be able to weather that storm, and then in the second, third round, maybe hit him with the shot, bring him down to the ground, submit him. But no, John Dodson kept up the speed and pace and darted in and out like the magician he is. And just, he did that thing. I fucking love when he does this. If you're fast enough to do it, it's sick. Especially as a southpaw. What he does is he'll circle away from the left hand, and as he does and he gets that foot to the outside, he'll just right hand, or left hand, since he's a southpaw. So he'll step his foot to the outside, so that way his right hand's in range, and he'll just bop, 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 all the way down until he did it to Eddie Weiland. He'll just spam that right hand or left hand on you. It was beautiful. Anyway, that was the UFC 222 card. Going into boxing, before we do, shout out to Charlotte Jiu-Jitsu Academy. Shout out to UFC Jim Matthews. And write, review, subscribe to the podcast. Check us out on YouTube now. Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. Other than that, this coming weekend, I'll be heading to Atlanta to go train an American Top Team for 2 days and to see what's up down there. I'll be with my boy Fitz. We'll do a special podcast here. There's no fights coming up this weekend. Yeah, the next one's the March 17th card. That's Alexander Volkov versus Fabricio Verdum. heavyweight fight in London. So this week is going to be more of just a recap of the news. So this Wednesday or so, I'll do a sips and slips and just talk about the news this week. It'll be actually I'll do it Thursday. I'll do it Thursday morning, um, and then Saturday, Sunday, I'll do something for you guys. Um, Probably do something Saturday. Yeah, we'll figure it out. I'll do something for you guys this weekend. All right. Other than that, guys, we'll go into the boxing, Showtime boxing fight real quick. Um, there's not a lot to talk about that there's like a bunch of fights. There's just this one fight. Deontay Wilder knocks out Luis Ortiz in the 10th round for probably one of the best heavyweight fights of all time. Jesus. All right. So, rounds 1 to 3. Um, Luis Ortiz, I, Luis Ortiz was doing really well. Luis Ortiz was going to the body, using that jab. Deontay Wilder was having a very, very hard time getting that jab off. He was fighting a southpaw. It's so hard to get your jab off if you don't train with southpaws regularly, which Deontay Wilder does a weird regiment. Deontay Wilder's always in shape, so his coach does this training regiment where he goes in and he spars for a week, takes a week off from sparring, maybe does like focus mitts and stuff, like a lighter week, and then spars again. And he'll kind of do that throughout the training camp. So his coach was saying they got a lot of southpaws working on it, working on him. So there's a chance that with that he got some work, but to the level of what Luis Ortiz was, it was very hard for him to get his pacing. He did knock down Luis Ortiz one time in the very beginning of the fight. He hit him with that right of his, which is a piston. If he can fire it straight or when he sits down on it. And then Luis started picking him apart again, hitting him to the body, hitting him. And then he clips Deontay. Like 5th round, 6th round, clips him. And, I mean, I thought he was out. I thought he was gone. But Deontay clings on till the end of the bell, comes back, puts it back on him. And then 10th round. 10th round hits hits Ortiz. Ortiz gets up, is like, I'm fine. Goes again, and instead of doing the Stavern thing where he runs at him and gets all wild, Wilder does get a little bit wild, but he planned it out, gets a little bit wild up on the head, and then hits him with an uppercut just to put him down. He's a monster. He's got TNT in his hands. That athlete football type is ridiculous, right? Talking about a guy with such explosive power that, I mean, he was going to play, he could have played professional football if he wanted to. I mean, look at him. He did well at Alabama. He just needed money faster, and so he got into boxing. And, I mean, he's like a LeBron James kind of athlete where he just was like, I want to fight instead. And this is what you see. If you get a guy like that in the UFC, John Jones, they got these like ridiculous athletic genes, and then they get real good at a specific skill. I mean, Deontay Wilder's not. It's not that he's never boxed amateur or anything like that. He knows how to box. Fundamentally knows how to box as well. Luis Ortiz, however, was the most technical fighter he's ever fought. Anthony Joshua is for sure not as technical as Luis Ortiz. But, I mean, he was in trouble in that fight. And he showed a very great chin. Not a good defense. Deontay Wilder's defense is not great. It's not the best thing. He does this like padding with his left hand to get the right hand in, but it's very hard with the southpaw, and it showed in this fight. But you can never count him out. I watched the fight. I was gripping onto my seat the whole entire time. I was like, come on, man. You can't go out. Luis Ortiz did good going to the body, trying to beat him up. But, man, Deontay Wilder, 10th round. So, what does that mean for Deontay? That means he has to sit back and watch Joshua go after Joshua Parker versus Anthony Joshua. And he is just tweeting now. He should be just tweeting on Anthony Joshua now, going, now it's your turn. I did my fucking work. Now it's your turn. You better get this done so he can have a mega fight. So now it's up to Anthony Joshua to beat Joshua Parker in a couple of weeks, if not months. If that happens, man, you got one of the best heavyweight boxing fights ever to happen. Right? If that fight happens, fireworks. Fireworks for sure. All right, guys. Excuse me. Thanks once again for tuning in, watching the channel. If you are listening on any podcast device or subscription platform you have, I really appreciate it. I'll be here, like I said, next Thursday for you guys, and then this weekend we'll have another scrap chat. I hope you guys have a good rest of your week. This has been, once again, another episode of the Southern Scrap Nation podcast. I've been your host, Daniel Jonas, and until next time, you guys have a good rest of your week.